My fiance said he'd fix me after the wedding, so I fixed my life by walking out mid-vows with his brother's confession in hand. I was halfway through curling my hair when I realized I didn't want to marry him. Not in a cold feet kind of way, not the jitters or last-minute doubts. This was different. This was the kind of clarity that hits you like a truck. One minute you're thinking about whether to do a smoky eye or something more natural, and the next you're staring at yourself in the mirror wondering how the hell you got here, about to vow your life to someone who doesn't even like you. My name's Jenna. I'm 28, a graphic designer from Charlotte, North Carolina. My fiance, well, ex-fiance now, was Scott, 31, a corporate lawyer who always seemed more in love with the idea of a perfect wife than with me. We'd been together for almost 3 years, engaged for 10 months, and during that time I slowly became less of myself. I didn't notice it at first. That's how it happens, right? Not with sirens and flashing signs, but with little cuts. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. It started when he made a joke about my laugh. "You sound like a cartoon character," he said at brunch with his parents. I laughed it off. Everyone did. But after that, I found myself trying to laugh quieter, more gently. Then came the clothes. "You really like those loud patterns, huh?" he'd say with a tight smile. "Maybe tone it down a little. You know, chic, elegant." So I did. I swapped my bright florals for beige and navy. By the time we got engaged, I was wearing neutral tones, smiling less and biting my tongue more. I told myself that was just compromise, growth, maturity. But really, I was shrinking. My friends noticed. My best friend Camille pulled me aside one night at my bachelorette party and asked, "Are you happy? Like, really?" And I said yes, because I thought I was, or maybe because I needed to believe I was. But everything started crumbling 2 weeks before the wedding, during a dinner with his brother, Ethan. Ethan and Scott couldn't be more different. Scott was the polished one. Straight A's, Ivy League, big law job, expensive tastes. Ethan was the black sheep. He was 29, worked as a carpenter, rode a motorcycle, and had this sarcastic, devil-may-care attitude that either charmed or infuriated everyone. I liked Ethan, even when Scott rolled his eyes and called him immature. We were all having dinner at our place. Scott, Ethan, me, and Scott's mom. When the conversation turned to marriage, Scott, half drunk on scotch, leaned back and said, "Can't wait until after the wedding when I can finally fix some of Jenna's quirks." I froze. "Fix me?" I laughed, hoping he was kidding. He wasn't. "You know what I mean," he said with that patronizing grin. "Get you on a better sleep schedule, clean up the clutter, maybe cut back on the junk food, and finally, God, convince you to stop watching those ridiculous reality shows." His mom laughed like it was adorable. Ethan didn't. Instead, he looked at me, really looked at me, and said quietly, "You're not broken, Jenna." That moment stayed with me. It haunted me through bridal showers and dress fittings and late nights rehearsing vows. Because it hit me. He wasn't marrying me. He was marrying the version of me he thought he could mold. A woman who smiled politely, wore beige, and laughed softly. So I started paying attention. I started noticing every little way I was being nudged, pushed, corrected. The way Scott would sigh when I spoke too loudly. How he'd tell me to not get emotional whenever I disagreed with him. How his friends always talked about me. Never to me. And suddenly all I could think about was Ethan. Not in a romantic way, at least not then, but in a clarity kind of way. Because someone finally saw me and didn't flinch. I should have backed out then. I should have called it off. But the invitations had been sent, the venue paid for, the dress altered, and every time I thought about canceling, I imagined the fallout, the embarrassment, the whispers. So I convinced myself I could handle it. Just get through the wedding, figure it out later. But then Ethan showed up the night before the rehearsal dinner with something that would change everything. And that's when I knew. I wasn't the one who needed fixing. He was. The envelope was creased like he'd been holding it all day, unsure whether to give it to me or set it on fire. Ethan showed up the night before the rehearsal dinner. I was alone at the venue helping the coordinator go over final touches. Scott had bailed last minute, said he had a client emergency, which was probably just code for golf or whiskey with his groomsmen. Typical. "Can we talk?" Ethan asked, voice low. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes and a kind of urgency in the way he stood, like his shoes were on fire and he was trying not to panic. He handed me the envelope and said, "I found this. I wasn't going to get involved, but I can't let you walk into this blind." Inside was a letter, folded, handwritten in Scott's careful, all-caps style. No date, no greeting, just words, awful, calculating words. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but it was clear who it was about. "After the wedding, I'll start introducing structure, boundaries. She doesn't handle criticism well, so it'll have to be gradual. Cut back on her spending. Get her to leave that freelancing nonsense. She's too emotional, too chaotic. She'll resist at first, but once she's mine, really mine, she'll adjust." I read it twice, then a third time. My hands were shaking. He wrote this? I asked. Ethan nodded. I found it in a notebook at his place. I wasn't snooping. It fell out of his gym bag when I was over there last week. I didn't know what to do with it. I sat down hard on one of the folding chairs meant for our guests. This wasn't just some offhanded comment. This was a plan. A system. A slow, deliberate erasure of who I was. He doesn't love you, Ethan said quietly. He wants to own you, polish you into something he can control. I should have cried. I should have screamed. But all I felt was this eerie, humming calm. Like the last second before a storm hits and everything goes still. You should show this to someone, Ethan added. Your family. A therapist. Hell, a lawyer if you need to. Instead, I folded the letter and slipped it into my clutch. Thank you, I said. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying every moment of our relationship with new clarity. Every joke, every backhanded compliment, every time he made me feel small and called it love. And through it all, one phrase echoed louder than the rest. Once she's mine. What kind of man writes that about someone he claims to love? The morning of the rehearsal dinner, I was a ghost. I went through the motions, smiled, toasted, wore the dress, let him put his arm around me in photos. No one noticed how stiff I was, how every touch made my skin crawl. I was planning my exit, not just from the wedding, but from the version of me that tolerated this. Because the thing about pretending to be someone else for love, eventually you forget how to breathe, but not anymore. I didn't plan to leave in the middle of the ceremony. Not originally. I thought maybe I'd call it off the morning of. Sit Scott down, tell him I knew everything, tell him I read the letter, that I understood now, that I wasn't his project, that I wasn't going to be fixed. But then I woke up, looked at the dress hanging on the back of the door, and something inside me snapped. I was tired of being quiet, tired of shrinking, and most of all, tired of making things easier for everyone but me. So instead of calling it off, I got dressed. My maid of honor, Camille, noticed. You good? She asked while doing my lipstick. I smiled at her in the mirror and said, I'm perfect. And in a way, I was. I was calm, composed, clearer than I'd ever been in my life, because I knew what was coming. The venue was beautiful. White peonies, gold accents, the whole Pinterest wet dream. Guests smiling, music playing softly in the background. Scott's mother already crying like we were starring in a Hallmark movie. Scott looked smug, like a man about to win something. His tux was sharp, his posture proud. He looked at me walking down the aisle like I was his reward. And that's what I was to him, a prize. Until I stopped halfway down the aisle. There was a rustle of confusion, murmurs. The music kept playing, the pianist uncertain whether this was part of the plan. I turned to the officiant. Sorry, just 1 second. Then I reached into my bouquet and pulled out the letter. Scott's face drained of color. I was going to keep this private, I said, my voice shaking but strong enough to carry. But then I realized silence is what got me here. So no more silence. People shifted in their seats. His mom whispered something to his dad. Camille stood up like she was ready to throw hands if needed. I unfolded the paper. This is what Scott wrote about me, I said. Not to me. About how he planned to change me after the wedding. Gradually, carefully, until I was small enough to manage. And I read it, out loud. Every word. There were gasps. A few people tried to get up. Ethan stood at the back, stone-faced, like a soldier watching a battle he already knew the outcome of. Scott stepped forward, hissing, "What the hell are you doing?" I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time I saw him clearly. Not the charming, successful lawyer everyone else saw, but the man who had been slowly unraveling me, thread by thread. I'm fixing my life, I said. Then I turned to the guests. I won't be marrying Scott today, or ever. The silence was deafening. I handed the letter to Scott, dropped the bouquet and walked out. No screaming, no breakdown, just the sound of my heels on the aisle and the weight falling off my shoulders with every step. Outside, Ethan was waiting by his motorcycle. You sure? He asked. I nodded. I've never been more sure. We rode off, not into a movie ending, not into a new romance, but into my own beginning. Update 1. Wow. Okay, I didn't expect this to blow up the way it did. I've been reading through the comments all night. Some of y'all are hilarious, some brutal, and some painfully spot on. Thanks for the support, the outrage, the spicy DMs, and even the few who accused me of being dramatic. To which I say, if reading a man's creepy emotional blueprint and walking out mid-vows isn't the time for drama, when is? Let me answer a few things and update on the chaos that followed. First, yes, the letter was real. It wasn't some fleeting thought or half-baked note. It was pages. I only read the worst excerpt aloud, but trust me, the full thing could be studied in psychology classes. The whole vibe was how to slowly deconstruct a woman you claim to love without making her notice. It read like a damn villain monologue. Second, Scott's reaction after I left, a mix between fury and PR crisis mode. From what I heard, he spent the rest of the afternoon trying to downplay it as a misunderstanding, said I misinterpreted his words. One of his groomsmen, who DM'd me, shout out to Matt, told me Scott was furious at Ethan for sabotaging the wedding, apparently tried to throw hands before his mom stepped between them. Third, my parents. Hoo boy, they were not thrilled about the spectacle. My mom cried, not because I walked away from a manipulative control freak, but because so much money was wasted. My dad asked if we could have handled it privately, right? Because quiet, complicit suffering would have made for a nicer photo album. Only person in my family who truly had my back? My cousin Leah. She hugged me afterward and whispered, "You were glowing walking out. Never seen you look that alive." That one hit deep. Fourth, Ethan, South. A lot of you are shipping us. Let's just say things are complicated. No, we're not dating. No, I didn't blow up a wedding to run off with the hot carpenter on a motorcycle, though I see why you'd root for that story. Ethan and I have had a couple long, emotionally messy talks since. He told me he almost didn't give me the letter, said part of him was scared it would just make things worse. But when he saw me smile through the rehearsal dinner like a Stepford bride, he knew he had to. Here's the thing. I'm not jumping into anything. I need time to breathe, to undo the slow unraveling that Scott put me through. Therapy, travel, pizza, time. But Ethan's still around, quietly supportive. No expectations, no pressure, just there. And for now, that's more than enough. Next update, I'll tell you what happened when Scott tried to salvage his reputation the week after. Spoiler, it involved a very awkward brunch and a microphone he really shouldn't have picked up. You ever watch someone try to lie their way out of something they wrote down? Because that's what happened when Scott decided to reclaim the narrative at a post-wedding family brunch he organized himself. Yes, after I nuked the ceremony. This man was on damage control like a scandalized politician. The morning after the wedding that wasn't, he sent out this mass text. "Hey everyone, I know yesterday was confusing and emotional. I'd love to invite you to brunch to clear the air and talk through what happened. No hard feelings. Let's heal. Let's heal." Like he hadn't spent the last year strategizing how to emotionally disassemble me like IKEA furniture. I wasn't planning to go. I really wasn't. But then Camille texted me, "He's inviting your friends, your family, like he's the one who got dumped. You sure you want to let him write the ending?" So yeah, I showed up, and I brought the letter. He'd booked a private room at this trendy little brunch place. Think mimosas, overpriced eggs, and a wall of fake greenery. There were about 25 people, some of my family, some of his, a few mutual friends. I wore the brightest damn sundress I owned, the one Scott once said made me look a little too loud. When I walked in, the room went silent. Scott stood at the front like he was about to host a TED Talk on being the victim of a runaway bride. He had notes, I kid you not, printed, bullet-pointed notes in a leather folio. I almost laughed. "First," he began, "I want to say I harbor no ill will. We all process stress differently." "Oh? Is gaslighting a coping mechanism now?" He went on for maybe 5 minutes, spinning this story about miscommunication, about how I got overwhelmed and how certain things were taken out of context. Said I was working through some personal insecurities. That was the moment I pulled out my phone. "Sorry, quick question," I said loudly, cutting through his speech. "When exactly did you write that I was too emotional to handle criticism, and that you needed to gradually restructure me into someone stable?" Gasps. Scott froze. I never said that." "Oh, right," I said, flipping my phone around. "I forgot to mention I scanned the letter. Want me to read the part where you call my career a frivolous little art hobby?" Someone near the mimosas choked. He turned red. "You're taking things out of context." "Cool. Then explain the context in which I'll start enforcing sleep schedules like training a puppy isn't disturbing." His parents looked mortified. My Aunt Judy literally whispered, "Jesus Christ." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just read 3 of the worst excerpts, thanked everyone for their time, and left. By the next day, 3 of his groomsmen had texted me apologies. His boss, yep, apparently someone told him, asked to grab coffee with me to discuss the situation, and I declined so hard I nearly deleted caffeine from my life entirely. As for Scott, his social media has been wiped clean. No more engagement posts, no more power couple captions. Just one black and white quote he posted a few days later. "Growth often comes from loss." Yeah, so does exposure. You'd think the worst part was walking out of the wedding, or reading that letter out loud, or watching Scott fumble through a half-baked redemption tour over brunch mimosas. But none of those compared to what came after, when I learned exactly where my family stood. Let me be clear, my family's not the worst. We're not the type to throw hands at Thanksgiving or end up on Dr. Phil, but we're not great with conflict either. My mom's the keep the peace type, even if it means pretending things are fine when they're cracked and bleeding underneath. My dad? Silent support. He'll back you up, but only after you do the brave thing first. So, when everything went down, When I walked out and blew up the wedding, I expected, maybe not applause, but understanding, at least from my parents. What I got instead was my mom sitting across from me in her dining room, dabbing her eyes with a napkin and saying, "I just wish you hadn't embarrassed him like that." I blinked. "He embarrassed himself, Mom," I said. "Did you even read the letter?" She sighed, like I'd brought up politics at church. I skimmed it. It just seemed intense. But people write things they don't mean all the time. You didn't have to humiliate him in front of everyone. I swear I felt something in me crack. He was planning to manipulate me, to fix me. You think that's just intense? You think me reading his own words was more humiliating than what he intended to do to my entire life? Her response? He still would have made a good husband. He's stable, successful. Maybe he just needed help understanding you, understanding me. That's when I realized something I didn't want to admit. My mom didn't want me to be happy. She wanted me to be secure, married, settled, presentable. She didn't see the difference between a loving partner and a controlling one. As long as I wore the dress and played the role, she could sleep at night. "I'm not a rescue dog, Mom," I said. "I don't need someone to train me." She flinched, then said the thing that broke me. "You're almost 30, Jenna. You can't afford to be picky anymore." There it was. Not just her side, but her belief that I had blown the best shot I'd ever get. I walked out of that house without saying another word. Camille picked me up. I didn't even cry. Just stared out the window while she drove me to her apartment and handed me a blanket and whiskey like it was a trauma starter pack. Later that week, my dad texted me, "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Your mom's wrong." It helped. A little, but the damage was done. Ethan came by a few days later to return a book I'd lent him ages ago. He lingered in the doorway. "You okay?" he asked. I wanted to say yes. I really did. Instead, I said, "My mom thinks I ruined my life, and part of me's scared she's right." Ethan looked at me, really looked, then said, "You didn't ruin anything. You just burned a house that was never safe." That line stayed with me, because he was right. I didn't ruin my life. I just stopped letting someone else build it. Update 2. Hey Reddit, it's been a couple weeks since the last post, and honestly, I thought things had finally died down. I moved most of my stuff out of our shared apartment, blocked Scott on everything, and started rebuilding my life one coffee-stained planner page at a time. Then he showed up, at my office. I was mid-Zoom call when someone from the front desk pinged me. "Hey Jenna, there's a guy here asking for you. Says it's urgent. Wearing a suit. Looks stressed." My stomach dropped. I knew. I muted my meeting, grabbed my phone, and let's be honest, a granola bar. I didn't know how long this was about to take, and went downstairs. There he was. Scott, tie crooked, hair uncharacteristically messy, holding something wrapped in tissue paper like it was a bomb he didn't know how to defuse. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice lower than I remembered. I didn't answer, just crossed my arms and stared. "I messed up," he said. "I know that. The letter, it wasn't supposed to be what it became. I was just journaling thoughts, trying to get control. Everything felt so chaotic with you, and I thought if I could just organize things, you'd be happy." Organize things. Like I was a calendar. He handed me the package. "I found this when I was packing up. It's the sketchbook you left at my place. You drew a picture of us on page 4. I never said anything at the time, but I loved that drawing." I didn't take it. He continued. "I know you hate me. Maybe you always did a little, but I didn't think you'd destroy me like that. At the wedding, in front of my mother. My boss heard about it. Clients asked questions. I finally spoke. You destroyed yourself, Scott. I just held up the mirror." He flinched. Then, something weird happened. He started crying. Not sobbing, not performative, just quiet, pathetic tears sliding down his face as he whispered, "I thought you were the fix. I didn't know I needed fixing." For a second, I felt it. The old pull. The empathy. The part of me that used to soften when he got vulnerable. But then I remembered the letter, the brunch, my mother's face, and I shook my head. "You don't get to cry here," I said. "You had your chance. You wrote the manual. I just refused to follow it." I turned and walked away. He didn't follow. I don't know what he'll do with that moment. Whether he'll learn, spiral, pretend it didn't happen. But I know what I did. I went back upstairs, finished my Zoom call, then emailed HR to make sure they knew what had happened. Just in case. And then I made an appointment with a tattoo artist. Because tomorrow, I'm getting inked. Page 4 from that sketchbook, I'm getting that drawing of me, prettiest lines I ever made, tattooed right under my collarbone. A reminder that I was art. Long before anyone tried to frame me, 2 months post-wedding that wasn't. I finally feel like myself again. No more beige sweaters, no more carefully edited personality, no more asking, "Does this make me look manageable?" That girl's gone. Buried under a pile of canceled contracts, returned gifts, and a shredded wedding binder that now lives in a thrift store bin somewhere in Charlotte. But you know what I found under all that? Me. Turns out, I'm louder than I thought. Funnier, a little messier, a lot freer. I like reality shows and neon eyeliner and laughing until I snort. And guess what? I don't need fixing. You know who reminded me of that? Ethan. I know. I said I wasn't looking for anything, and I wasn't. But sometimes, someone sits with you in your mess without trying to organize it, and that's what he did. He didn't swoop in with solutions, he just showed up to help me move out, to bring pizza when my mom stopped returning my calls, to sit on the floor with me and listen while I tried to explain why being seen for the first time in years felt like both a gift and a wound. One night, I asked why he gave me that letter, why he risked blowing up his own family for someone who wasn't even his friend at the time. He just said, "Because I saw how small you looked around him." And I remembered the first time I saw you laugh, really laugh, at one of my dumb jokes, and I thought, that's not a woman who should be quieted. So yeah, we kissed. Once, then again, then a lot. But we're not rushing into anything. We've both got scars. We've both got stories. We're just figuring it out, and it feels real. No performance, no plan. Just two people rebuilding from rubble. As for Scott, word is he's laying low, transferred to another firm, trying to reclaim his narrative elsewhere. Let him, because I've got mine. The tattoo's healed now. That sketch, me, barefoot, laughing, mid-spin in a dress he said was too much, is permanent, right under my collarbone. And every time I see it in the mirror, I remember, I was never broken. I was just too big for his version of love, and I finally made room for my own.